It is an all ACC edition of the Desmond Johnson Show here live on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. David Glenn from the North Carolina Sports Network in the house as he is every other Tuesday with me co-hosting. We got my man, the sixth man of Carolina basketball, B-Daht in the house. We got to figure out what in the world happened to ACC basketball this past weekend. Basically annihilation. There's only one team left. They're the number one rated team in the country, but they're by themselves. So we're going to get into that a little bit. We're going to talk about the ACC as a whole. We had 2 head coaching hires this past week. We'll get info from DG on what that means for the significance of the league itself. We're going to lead off with the injury to Juju Watkins, the USC star last night, tearing her ACL. Reports coming down. What does that mean for the women's side of this bracket and the sport as a whole for women's basketball? A whole lot more. It's a college basketball-filled Desmond Johnson show. Let's go ahead and roll that intro.
Live with Desmond Johnson, son, the live is one. Represent NC to the fullest.
Yeah, welcome to the Carolinas. Everywhere you go, the sky is Carolina blue, the finest. Live action, feedback, the city need that. I've been number one, no cap. Here's the recap. Adrenaline is my addiction. I'm about to relapse. Step on the turf if you won't and get your weed whacked. I'm going harder than a martyr on the starter end. It's the heart of man, that's a rap like a cardigan. I'm breaking records, it's 4th and inches, I count the seconds. The over-under's my roar of thunder, my secret weapon. Yeah, the game is to be told. I don't break, I break modes. Follow me on Tobacco Road.
Live with Desmond Johnson, son, the live is one. Represent NC to the fullest.
And welcome into a brand new edition of the Desmond Johnson Show here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. You can catch the best of on WWBG 1470 AM every Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. You can hear it in Winston-Salem on WTOB 980 AM, 96.7 FM at 6 o'clock every Friday afternoon. David Glenn from the North Carolina Sports Network in the house, sixth man of Carolina basketball, B-Daht in the house. And I want to lead off with the breaking news. Juju Watkins last night, the star forward for USC, tearing her right ACL on a routine move to the basket. USC does advance. They are a 1 seed on the women's side of the bracket, but Juju kind of took the place of Caitlin Clark in terms of the star of women's basketball this past season. And USC didn't have a very easy road going forward. They might see UConn and Paige Buckers in the Elite Eight, and that was getting billed as a Juju versus Paige type of deal. And now UConn's going to end up being the heavy favorite in that matchup if it actually happens. Just quick thoughts on Juju and women's basketball as a whole, how it's grown over the past couple of years with stars like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and others who, a couple years ago, you weren't going to see a women's basketball player with a McDonald's meal, like Angel has, or, things like that. And they have elevated this to the point where Juju was kind of carrying the water for women's college basketball this year and doing a fantastic job at it. DG, your thoughts on Juju's injury, and are you still interested in watching some of the women's tournament?
I am, and I'll tell you this, I'm glad I'm with you, Des, and B-Daht, because I might be depressed otherwise if I was not with a couple of my favorite guys. I mean, I've covered the ACC for 38 years. This is as bad as it has been in that 38 years, and we can get into the details. They've had other years where there was only one Sweet 16 team from the league, but it's as close to rock bottom as you get. And as a guy who, not just me, but the world has had more eyeballs on women's basketball in the last 2 years than at any time in the history of the world. And one of the few things in a world filled with fanatics and fanaticism that almost everybody can agree on is we want to see great performers perform, right? I mean, whatever team you might root for, whatever sport you might love the most, you hate to see injuries of any kind, but it's especially disappointing to see it to superstar players. Imagine if we watched the rest of the men's tournament without a Cooper Flag of Duke, who just earned one of the National Player of the Year awards. So he joins Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and Zion Williamson as the only 4 freshmen ever to win National Player of the Year. Imagine if we lost a Janai Broome of Auburn to injury. I mean, he had a scare health-wise earlier this year, but we still get to enjoy him playing in the Sweet 16 and forward. Juju's a first-team All-American, a lot of fun to watch. I'm not one of those who says I love to watch the women's game more than I like to watch the men's game, but she in particular is a lot of fun to watch. So it's just sad, man, because there's no way her team has a chance rest of the way. It's kind of like Iowa State on the men's side losing their star point guard at the last minute. Great team, but no way. And that's just one of the sad aspects and unpredictable and unpreventable aspects of sports.
Dot, your thoughts
I gotta
on
agree. I just gotta agree with DG on a lot of that, man. Like Juju's absence from USC, they can go ahead and ship it on home, man. I personally think that this season's championship is UConn's to lose. That Paige Beckers is just something special. I was definitely looking forward to them playing if they met up in that Elite Eight. But it's all about big names, man. And that is Juju Watkins is one of the biggest names, if not the biggest, in women's basketball right now. So for her to lose, she loses not just for USC, but she also loses for the ratings for the NCAA tournament. This is an ACL injury, so it's going to take some time, and hopefully she can come back and be that same Juju. So now we're talking about WNBA money, possibly. A lot of things are in the conversation when you talk about an injury of this magnitude. But when you ask me, am I still watching women's basketball? Absolutely. Friday at 2:30, baby. Huh? Carolina Duke. What you talk about? Big games. And I was hoping that Oregon would have messed around and won that game because it would have been Carolina versus Oregon, Deja Kelly versus Carolina.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Madness for me. Oh, I was looking forward to that. LSU and NC State, I'm looking for that. I like Flau'jae and them Tigers. And NC State has been a nemesis of mine ever since I've been really paying attention to women's basketball in the Carolina perspective. When Coach Banghart got there, that NC State Wolfpack team, they have been a true nemesis. So I'm very still excited about the women's side of the brackets, and I'll still be locked in. But it is a huge, huge loss losing Juju Watkins.
It's crazy too, because honestly, this is really the first, and we'll get into the Sweet 16 and Duke and all that stuff here in just a bit as well. I wanted to stay in first I want to go into the ACC and their performance of this past week. I'm 47. I can't remember a weekend where literally almost everyone was gone. Maybe there was one like 20 years ago, I feel like, where we all kind of left after the first weekend, there wasn't really anybody left from the ACC. It was like a 2002 or 3 or something like that. But this year felt different because Louisville and Clemson were top 15 ranked teams going into this. And Carolina had that great game against San Diego State. Looked like they're on fire. They were on fire. And then it just kind of reverted back to the mean in that round of 64 game against Ole Miss, where they just dug too big of a hole. And then you knew Hubert was going to get in them in halftime, and they were going to come out and play defense, and they were going to make a little run somewhere, and they did. And it played exactly to the script that they had played all year, and they just ran out of road. They ran out of road, made a couple key mistakes at the very end. The other team survived. Carolina gets a quad one loss. And it's like, let's start off with Carolina. We'll get to Louisville and Clemson in a minute, but the portal opened up on Monday, which I have problems, but I don't like that the transfer portal is opened in the middle of March Madness. If anything, it should start at the end of March Madness and go for a month there. Now you've got it where, the situation in NC State, bringing in Will Wade, all that stuff's going on like in the middle of March Madness. And how do you know you got kids that are playing for your team that aren't already talking to other teams? All this is going on if they're still active in March Madness. So with Carolina, start off with UDG. I just looked over at your transfer portal page. I probably should refresh it because I don't know who's been out since then. I'm scared to go to Twitter because I don't want to know if Elliot Cadeau is in the portal or something like that right now. As far as I can tell, there's no Duke or Carolina players in the portal currently right now. Is that correct, DG?
That is correct.
Okay.
It changes hourly. So my time with you guys is the only time of the day today that I won't be updating that page. But it can change minute to minute in these first few days of the portal, especially. I'll give you a quick number. For the entirety of last year's portal, roughly 100 ACC men's basketball players departed. Already in 2 days, almost 50 names are in the portal in 2 days. And it's only a 30-day window this year. It was 45 last year, a 60-day window the year before that. So they keep narrowing it because the coaches don't want to go too far into the spring with too much roster uncertainty. But it just makes it even more extreme speed dating. You got to make all these in this compressed amount of time, and you don't get to know each other as well as you could in a traditional high school setting where you might spend 3 years recruiting a person instead of 3 days or 3 weeks.
DG, correct me if I'm wrong. This was the transfer portal was started because of the COVID situation, correct?
It was a combination of things, but that was part of it. coaches complained about tampering. All these things were like the perfect storm. Remember the lawsuits, kids didn't want to sit out a year. So then they found some lawyers to fight that rule and they won. So now you got immediately eligible transfer. You had the chaos of COVID. You had coaches complaining about tampering. And one of the solutions was, hey, let's try to be more transparent. If B-Daht, you don't have to leave. A lot of fans think if your name's in the portal, you have to leave. You don't have to leave. But if B-Daht wanted to explore his options as a star player, now let's let him put his name in there. You're even allowed to restrict who can contact you. But if you don't put any restriction, anybody can contact you. And then there's a back and forth, and it's more above board than the tampering and illegal contact. That still happens. Right. Anybody who thinks they waited until Monday to contact players, that's never land.
Like year round.
But there is this period of 30 days where things are more transparent, and the kids have more freedom, the coaches have a little bit more certainty, and as soon as your season ends, you got to have conversations with your own players while telling your staff to go out and look at who might be entering the portal, because basically, unless you're recruiting high school players at the level of a Duke and very few others, you better find some of your best players in the portal. You're not going to last very long in this new world.
And that's why it almost seems like a blessing in disguise that Carolina lost when they did, because they were able to immediately jump into the portal, because everyone knows the flaws of this team. They didn't get a big man. They didn't get a quality big man. They got outbid for the ones they wanted. And this whole year, JP Mundy and Ryan Stone, we have a sports message thread that we have on our phones where we're basically needling each other all year long. And JP knows I'm a Carolina diehard. He roots for Wake Forest. He roots for Tennessee. He can't stand Carolina for the most part. So he's like, you guys didn't do this, didn't do that. And I was like, look, I can almost promise you they will never get outbid for a big man ever again. Like after going through this year, like Carolina basketball is not going to do that. They will dump money into that basketball program and make sure those recruits come there. Talking about how the roster turnover in the ACC going into the SEC, Carolina losing to Ole Miss. Sean Padula, where was he? Virginia Tech?
Virginia Tech. Oh, this is like 10 dudes. This is a theme.
There's like 10 dudes in this. There's 7 SEC teams in the Sweet 16, which is nuts to begin with. They got half all the league, pretty much all the league, but 2 teams made it to the tournament. So yeah, so they got half of the teams that got in made it to the Sweet 16. So that makes sense. But if you look down their rosters, there's like a ACC player, a former ACC player, almost on all of these rosters someplace. And some of them were players that were actually good, like starters, like in the ACC, like at Georgia Tech or Virginia Tech or wherever, went to the SEC because they got given more money. And now look, the SEC, I never thought I'd see a day where the SEC was the #1 conference in football and basketball. Like it felt like this weekend was kind of a culmination of the ACC is too big, it's too watered down, and they're not dumping money into college basketball because they still think they're a football conference, and they're not. they're not ever going to be the SEC or Big Ten in football, but they had something special in basketball, and it feels like it's kind of like, I don't know, there's something. Both of you guys have been around ACC for as long as you've been alive, and this year was the first year really where I was like, okay, this feels like usually a player on a team. If you're a casual fan and you're watching, who the star player for Cal is, who the star player is for this or that or whoever. Back in the day, when it was 8 or 9 teams, we could name off the starting lineups pretty much for every team that Carolina was going to play or whoever. Those quadruple headers, Jefferson Pilot on Saturdays or in the middle of the year, whatever, where Kenny Anderson and Georgia Tech are taking on Virginia or whatever it is. Now it's like you can't keep track of it because now they're transferring around too. So it's like, how do you build a team? And I'm bringing this all back to Carolina because Carolina's now searching in the portal, and I'm hoping we'll start getting some news in terms of who they've offered or whatever. I've heard rumors of Elliot Cadeau asking for a gigantic bag, and UNC has countered. I don't know what's up with that. I would imagine Cadeau would stay because it would be basically his team next year, him and Seth Tribble. I don't think Seth's going anywhere. He tried it last year. The ones that can stay, like Van Allen, Lubin, and others, I assume they're going to stay. They're going to have a lot of holes that they need to fill in the portal, like right now. So I didn't want to see Carolina go into the Sweet 16 and get bombed by like 40 points because that could have happened, because eventually they were going to run into like an Auburn or somebody. But it still feels weird that Carolina's sitting at home after technically 2 games, but in all honesty, the first round. They lost in the first round. So I'm really posing this as a question for the entire league for both you guys. What do you think is the #1 thing the ACC needs to do to start to catch up to the SEC besides just dumping a bunch of money into college basketball? Because it feels like it's more than that. B-Dot, let's start off with you on that.
Doesn't seem like it's more than that to me. Doesn't seem like it's more than that to me.
I mean, I could be wrong.
It's just as simple. It's transactional at this point. Like
Yeah.
the time, like I'm sitting here listening to you talk about, we knew the whole starting lineups, and you got this kid right now. What is it? Justin Pippen from Michigan. He's in the transfer portal right now.
Why?
His team is still playing. How is this even possible? That's why I asked DG a second ago, like, was this reflection of the COVID? Because will there ever be a time when we'll get back to when things really made sense? Like fifth year seniors and those type things, like that won't be the norm, I don't think, moving forward. And
No, that's
last year, right? This is the last year of the seniors, the fifth year seniors.
The 5 full year guys like an RJ Davis, they're almost entirely cycled out now. There's like a couple of weird injury guys that might have one extra year,
Right.
but it's not going to be the norm moving forward. It's going to be the rare fifth year guy with 5 full seasons. So the stats will go back to normal.
I was just asking that because I was wondering if there were parallels in those two situations. But as you just said, they're not. Like, so this is a situation where they'll just continue to shrink down the time you have in the portal, but the portal is still going to be there to stay. And as somebody who has a senior in high school as a son that plays basketball, our best route at this point is to go the junior college route, because he can go 2 years junior college and it doesn't start his NCAA clock. And then you can go D1. So you're still going to have these 24 and 25-year-olds playing in D1, D2, because we got to go JUCO. Because I talked to a college coach this weekend at the BCIC, and I told him I had a senior son that I wanted to just look at some footage. And he told me, he was like, I'll look at it, bro, but I'm going to be honest, we can't even recruit high school seniors. How ridiculous is that?
Wow.
For a D1 HBCU college coach to tell me he can't even recruit my senior son. So like this, it's just so to answer your point, like I think there is no other answer but to have Duke has the blueprint. Duke has the template, and it really angers me as a Carolina fan that Duke is so many light years beyond everybody else in the ACC right now, but they got it. And I'm just hoping that our general manager, Mr. Tanner, can make us a full house and we can have some great times back at Carolina basketball, because we're going to need it.
I don't think we're that far away, because it is Carolina basketball. It's not like when Indiana fell apart or UCLA or that kind of thing. Like, I think the infrastructure is there to be built. Duke just had a 3-year head start, and there's no one to blame but the rest of the league. We all saw it coming. The SEC saw it coming. For some reason, I think the ACC, some of the like Carolinas and other like Syracuse's and others of the world, thought you could still bring a kid into the Dean Dome and point up at the rafters and be like, do you want to be up there? Do you want to be part of this? Sign right here. And like money wasn't going to be an issue. Theo Pinson said it best a couple weeks ago on his podcast. It's like these players, like you just said, Dot, these players aren't loyal anymore. They're loyal to the check, like, and the fit. They want to make sure it's a good fit, yes, but you see a lot of kids. The 2 kids that played at Rutgers are going to be top 3 NBA picks, Ace Bailey and the other kid. They were a sub 500 team. Like,
I didn't see one of his games this year. I didn't see one Ace Bailey.
No idea what he looks like. Welcome to the Charlotte Hornets, Ace Bailey. That's probably going to be who we end up picking. But like, I've seen more Cooper Flag than anything else in terms of those top draft picks coming out. And it's just crazy. Duke is the only one I can see that's figured out we can still get these top 2-3 high school classes and bring them in. And they'll be littered with some 4-star kids like Isaiah Evans, who has gotten better as the years gone on. Carolina used to get a bunch of 4-stars, and they would stay 3-4 years and get better as they went on. Bryce Johnson, RJ Davis, Armando Bit, guys like that, where Marcus Page, where they were good in the beginning, but they became great by the time they got to junior, senior year. So you don't have to worry about them leaving. Now it's like with Ian Jackson, Drake Powell, you got to worry about, are they going to transfer? Are they going to try the NBA? Are they going to come back? Like, do we need to give them more money? Like, this whole thing it's not college basketball. Like, to me, it's made it where the idea of a Cinderella is going to be even harder going forward, because the mid-majors are getting drained of their best guys after a year or two. They get moved up to these Big Ten, SEC, hopefully ACC schools down the road, and the mid-majors don't have those Steph Currys like anymore. Like, they get found and they go into the portal and they find a place to go. DG, who would you say that's in the portal right now? And I know it's a loaded question because it's, it's live, like right now, it's live action. But in the portal right now, I saw a 7-foot kid, I think from the Mountain West Conference. It wasn't San Diego State. It was somebody else that people were eyeing to maybe go to Carolina. Big, huge 7-foot guy.
There was a defensive player of the year in that league. I think he is the center for San Diego State.
Yeah.
But let me go back to something that you guys both put your finger on, where, Des, you were talking about the number of SEC starters who were plucked from ACC rosters. And B-Daht, I think, put his finger on the starting point. Like, we could put a puzzle together into what explains the demise of the ACC as a whole, or UNC in particular. It's multifaceted, right? But I think B-Daht's point about just the size of the bag is the starting point. We could dissect, hey, the ACC's lost a lot of great head coaches over the last decade, period, right? I mean, multiple Hall of Famers. That's part of the equation. But here's something I know to absolutely be true. There are ACC basketball teams whose name, image, likeness, money budget 1 year ago at this time was $2 to $3 million. Those same schools when I say this coming year, I mean they're spending right now for next year's team. The budget is $8 to $10 million. And that means they are tripling their investment. And they have realized and accepted that they simply were behind the times 1 year ago at this time. And I always use this analogy. What if B-Daht had a playground basketball team? I had one, and Des, you had one. All right. So we each have 13 guys. And at the end of a season, B-Daht sees a couple dudes on my team and throws a bunch of money at them. And now he's got them for the next year. You see a couple dudes on my team, you like Des, you throw money at them. And I'm kind of old fashioned and I'm not sure how this money works. And I'm not sure whether I should be. And you know what happens the next year? You two beat me in smithereens. And I learned the lesson the hard way, right? And I still try hard and I still recruit and I still sign my own portal guys. But it is really that stark of a reality that the ACC whiffed. And you mentioned a couple examples, but Miles Kelly is a starting guard at Auburn, which is still alive in this tournament. He was a 2-year starter at Georgia Tech. Andrew Carr is a starting forward at Kentucky, still in this tournament. 2-year starter at Wake Forest. And Sean Padula, the Mississippi example, 2-year starter at Virginia Tech. If you get a proven 2-year starter from a fellow Power 5 conference, that's as good as gold. I mean, unless you're recruiting Cooper Flagg out of the high school ranks, and there's only so many of them, there is nobody better that you can sign than a multi-year starter from another major conference. So
which is why they're not going after high school freshmen, right? Because they're not going after high school freshmen because they'd rather have that junior with 2 years experience already. I mean, he's a grown man. He's 21 at that point. Like, instead of a 17-year-old, you got to get him in the weight room, make sure his grades right, and all this other stuff. So
it's like any profession. Experience trumps anything, right?
Right. Yeah. And the ACC kind of got left out in the cold thinking that they could just ride their name. And we talked about this 2 weeks ago, DG, where I was saying, I almost feel like the ACC needs to expand. Like they're in a weird spot where they've got this weird number of teams, but they're literally from coast to coast, from California to North Carolina at this point. Just go all in at this point. Make it 24 teams, make it like the all coast conference. So it's still ACC. You got a bunch of teams out west. You got the teams out here. You do something with the Big East. You just make this gigantic super league, because that's ultimately what the SEC and Big Ten are going to do. Eventually, they're going to make this new super league.
I hate that in the idea that, like, this year having an ACC tournament with no NC State was insane.
Yeah.
That makes no sense, dude. The fact that a SMU and a Cal are in the ACC tournament and no NC State, like, are you serious?
In
Charlotte.
Charlotte.
We should not be a league so big that the founding fathers don't have a place at the table. Like, it's insane. Like, I don't know what needs to be done, but I know. But doubling back quickly to what you all said about the portal, the name is in the draft. Magoon Guath. He was the big man for San Diego State. Like, I would like something like that. Like the guy Biddle from, I think, Oregon, the big 7-footer. Like, I don't see him in the portal.
There's some big men in there. I looked today. I was like, okay.
Does jump in the portal,
yeah.
I would like that. That's what we need more than anything. Man. We need a dog that can protect that paint, man. We'll be straight.
I want to circle back around. It was a good segue actually into the what DJ was saying with the head coaching dream. We did have two major head coaching hires in the ACC this week. Ryan Odom going over to Virginia, filling the shoes of Tony Bidett, and Will Wade going to NC State after McNeese State actually had an upset win in the tournament. went a little bit further than people expected them to. They've both been named officially head coaches at both schools, respectively. You mentioned NC State not even making the ACC tournament. It cost Kevin Keatts his job after he just got extended after their magical run last year, beating Duke in the Elite Eight, winning the ACC tournament, getting into the big dance, that whole thing. And then this year, NC State was just a shell of what they were the year before. Well, I shouldn't say that because they weren't like great all of last year. They got hot at the very end of the year and rode that. But who do you think, starting with you, DG, because I know you report on this as it's happening, which one of those coaches do you think is the bigger hire, like for that school and the ACC as a whole, as we sit here and talk about the struggles of the league?
I think it's probably Will Wade for NC State, although I have a lot of respect for Ryan Odom at UVA as well. And, of course, Florida State and Miami decided to take a chance on first-time head coaches, which is a little more of a roll of the dice, but we'll see. One thing that's a lot different now, and I mean really, really recent years than whether you go back 20 or 50 or 100 years, a head coach's responsibility is so far beyond the X's and O's now. You not only have to learn how to coach, depending on your school, you may be asked to raise name, image, likeness money with your preferred men's basketball boosters. And Will Wade is such a big personality. Wolfpack fans are going to like him for one aspect of his personality. He has kind of a willingness to poke you in the eye on purpose or step on your toe on purpose and not apologize. And Wolfpack Nation tends to love that kind of in-your-face personality. But he has another aspect of his personality that if he were with the three of us right now, he's just talkative and down to earth and easy to converse with. And if he can build, a following among deep-pocketed boosters, Des, we've talked on your show about how this coming year is the first time ever there's going to be what's called revenue sharing, where athletes get a chunk of money straight from the athletic department. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks are forgetting there's still going to be the outside money. The car dealership, the corporation, they can still do NIL deals with athletes even in this new world. And let's say at a school like Clemson, maybe they tell Brad Brownell, hey, man, we have this $20+ million in internal money, and we're going to give you $4 million because Dabo wants $15 million, right? But Brad, you can raise another $4 million among your boosters to go with our $4 million we're giving you internally, and there's your $8+ million budget for NIL purposes. So I think Will Wade, he's been a winner at 4 different schools, so he's proven his X's and O's. He also has that just galvanizing personality that I think, actually, I know. I'm not sure Boo Corrigan would have hired Will Wade were it not for a lot of deep-pocketed Wolfpack fans going to bat for Will Wade. I can promise you this. Will Wade was not Boo Corrigan's first choice at the beginning of the Wolfpack search. He was Wolfpack Nation's first choice, but given his NCAA penalties at LSU, that raises a red flag. Boo Corrigan came from West Point, where you don't bend rules, you don't break rules, you don't pay the girlfriends of your players much money, you lie to the NCAA. So there were some questions there. Obviously, they got over that, but I mean,
it's all legal now. Like everything he did before,
not everything legal. He did. You're still not allowed to pay hush money. You're still not allowed to lie to the NCAA. But some of what he did is now legal.
Yeah,
but a lot of what he did is still not allowed.
What are your thoughts, Dot, between Will Wade at NC State and Ryan Odom at Virginia? Two, you could call them sleeping giants. I mean, Virginia just won the national championship 6 years ago, 2019. But NC State in particular, I've said it on the show numerous times, NC State's one of those jobs nationally where I'm like, they could be a sleeping giant if the right person gets put in there and the right money gets put behind them. And NC State gets off this notion that they're this national football school. It feels like they push their football so much and they forget you've got a couple national championships in basketball. You've had some of the greatest players of all time play at NC State. And it's almost like an afterthought sometimes until we get into the season. And then it's like, all right, when does football season start? That's kind of how they are. How do you feel about these two hires, Will Wade at NC State, Ryan Odom at Virginia?
I don't know how many they have, but I don't know if it's a couple championships, but I digress. Nevertheless,
two, right, DJ?
I guess.
Yeah, it was two.
I don't think about the cardiac cats, but nevertheless, I like the storyline from Coach Wade. I really like that storyline the best, just because I heard his wife went to Carolina. She's a Tar Heel. So like that whole dynamic will be fun for us trolls on social media and our social sewers to have some fun and pick some fun at that. But I just like his attitude, and he's already got a win against an ACC school, so he's already coming in kicking butt. But the best hire in college football in the ACC this season has been Coach Belichick over there at Carolina, because that is going to. I mean, it's going to funnel money right to the daggone basketball program. It's going to make athletics huge. Like, I really think the Bill Belichick effect for what it will do for basketball, which is so strange because Carolina has always been the pulse of, well, basketball has always been the pulse of Carolina athletics. I mean, you can talk about women's soccer, of course. I don't mean to diminish that on any level, but when you talk about football and basketball is king at Carolina. And to have a Bill Belichick and the potential that he can do with the NILs and the players that he can bring in and the recruiting and what he can possibly do for Carolina basketball, like, I think that will do wonders for the basketball program at Carolina. So I think that was a nice chess play with Carolina.
Yeah, I hated the Patriots and I hated Bill Belichick, but once he got signed to Carolina, I was like, this could be
interesting. Take these threes off.
Yeah. It's like if Coach K got hired to coach the Charlotte Hornets all of a sudden.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what happens.
I rocked with K when he was on the the Olympic team. I was like, all right, Coach K.
It's fine. Go ahead. So, speaking of Duke, before we get out of here, of course, Duke, the lone ACC team left in the tournament in the Sweet 16. They'll be taking on a familiar foe, Caleb Love, and the Arizona Wildcats, who they already beat earlier this year. They'll meet each other. I think it's a 9:39 tip-off on CBS on Thursday night. I'm trying to work on stuff to get the guys from Everything College Basketball, Josh Burton and those guys, to come in on Wednesday to do a deeper preview of the Sweet 16. But while I have you both, did Duke impress you the most this weekend out of the teams that played in the tourney, or was there another team that impressed you more than what you saw from Duke in these two games?
I think I was more impressed with Maryland. I hadn't seen much of Maryland. I hadn't seen Queen for that freshman to be as dominant as he was and to make a shot that big. I think this Duke team that I'm seeing is the team that I thought they were going to be all season. Like, I really think this is a Duke national championship to lose. Like, they are so stacked, man. They really are. I was telling Jay Will, I had the pleasure to speak to Jay Will, and I was just talking to him. This is the best Duke team they've had since his teams in the early 2000s. Like, it's better than the Paolo team. It's better than the Zion team. Like, this team is stacked from 1 through – they were stacked 1 through 10. Now they're stacked by 1 through 8, 1 through 9. But everybody they bring off the bench could go start anywhere else in the country.
Yeah. And I took that for granted because I didn't watch a lot of Duke in the beginning of the season. I just knew it was Cooper Flag. And then you start watching them, and it's like, Cooper Flag doesn't need to play well for this team to win. Like, he cannot even get it.
Double-digit points, and they can still go crazy, especially when Proctor's shooting at the clip he's shooting.
If he's going to shoot like that, there's no way to beat him.
John Shire does not get the credit he deserves, man. John Shire is a phenomenal coach, and I hate admitting this, but he is a phenomenal coach, and he has been doing a great job the past 3 years, man. Like, he is like, when you talk about somebody who was the perfect successor to Coach K, I questioned it at first, but my God, it is so relevant. John Shire is the guy.
It's kind of similar to what they did with Carolina, but they've worked out. Go ahead, DJ.
A long list of nightmare stories trying to follow the legend in a lot of different sports, and a lot of prominent programs went through a lot of indigestion during that process. Coach K to John Shire is as smooth and seamless as anything we've ever seen. He's already won 2 ACC titles. You know, he's maybe getting a national title this year. I have Duke winning it all as well. And I think it was Hubert Davis at Carolina in Charlotte at the ACC tournament who underlined a couple points. One, it's not just a couple of players. Right. Obviously, they beat Carolina without Cooper Flag and without Malik Brown. And then Hubert also complimented their unselfishness. Mm-hmm. And I think Hubert's own team wrestled with selfishness, and it got better as the season went on. And they did some good things before they crashed out. But there's even more unselfishness at Duke, right? Like Sion James, John Shire circled Sion James as somebody who made a wise decision to go to Duke because the NBA is only going to ask him to be a complimentary role player too. So Sion gets to show the NBA, see, I know I scored 16 points a game at Tulane, and I can do that sometimes. But I'm not afraid to defer to these guys around me. I'm not afraid to call the post or hand it to Cooper or, be unselfish. I don't care if I average 10 points a game. he's elevating his draft status by being a role player. And you have Malawach doing his thing, and Knippel was the ACC tournament MVP, Flag National Player of the Year. Proctor shooting as well as any time in his 3 years at Duke.
Yep.
Evans has been cold lately, but can put up 15 plus on you on a good night.
He started playing defense all of a sudden. Like, he wasn't playing defense all year.
Unbeatable, but if I could pick only one team, it would be Duke.
The guy number 21, real quick. There's the guy. Yeah, like he's been playing 3 minutes a game. Malik Brown goes down. He looks like he's been playing 20, 25 minutes. Like, what is going on?
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It reminds me of 1999 Duke. It really does. Where it's just like, it's like Thanos, like it's inevitable. Like there's teams in this bracket where we've been like, oh, Florida, ooh, Auburn, Duke's already beat them. Like, Duke beat them. So it's like the only teams.
It does. The crazy thing is your analogy is perfect, but 99 Duke did not win it all.
I know. That's why I'm like, and that's going to be my final question. Like, out of the teams that are left, that was actually I was setting myself up for the final question here. They do remind me of 99 Duke, because 99 Duke was dominant. Like, they got to a point where it was like, they almost started feeling like UNLV. Like, it was like, it's just, and now they're going to win this game by 20 points until they ran to that UConn team and they had a game. Who's left in this tournament that you feel like is the biggest threat to Duke right now?
It's not
Arizona. It's probably be the national championship, I imagine.
Arizona doesn't shoot it well enough from the perimeter. If you look at the 3 games that Duke lost, all 3 of those teams either hit double-digit threes, which I don't think Arizona is capable of doing. Clemson didn't hit a ton of threes, but I think they shot like 4 of 10, so they had a high percentage. And Clemson was the only team that hurt Duke on the boards. So there's not many weak areas to go after, right? And Alabama in the same bracket as Duke is so explosive offensively that you just never know. I mean, how would they stop Duke? I don't know. But could they win a 97-94 game? That is possible. But I like Duke against anybody they might have to play the rest of the way. And Alabama may be as big of a threat as anybody waiting them after that.
Do you see anybody, Doc, on the horizon?
I'm with DG in the idea that I don't think it's going to be a game where you can try to defensively scheme against Duke. They got too many weapons at too many spots. You just got to outscore them. And the only team that I really think can even match up on any level is 3 teams. Alabama, I really like, because I like their attitude. I love their coaching as much as my Tar Heel family would hate for me to say that. Auburn, I really like Auburn and Janai Broom. Like, he's a stud, and if he gets going and can stay out of foul trouble, he'll really be some problems for Duke. And Florida is just so big, man. Like, Florida is big and aggressive. Like, I could see them causing problems for Duke. But again, we just named out 8. You talk about knowing starting lineups. We know all, like, the first 8 that plays for Duke.
Yeah.
All of them quality guys, like quality. All of them could go league. Like, it's insane how stacked they are. Like, you have to have your best coaching day, your best offensive day, and a very good defensive day to even try to compete against this Duke team.
It's 1990 UNLV, and I hate using that comparison. That's like my favorite team of all time, but that's literally when people would talk about that team, you had to do those things you just marked off to beat that team. And when Duke beat that team in the Final Four in 91, they had to play the perfect game. Now, I don't know if they had to play the perfect game to beat Duke. I mean, we just saw Carolina walk them down from 24 like 2 weeks ago. They lost the game.
But I think they get bored. I think they get bored, man. I really think
I do too.
And they just be like, man, all right, let's let them get in a little bit.
Yeah. And then they go, and they take off. I don't understand it, but that's what it looks like. There's a team y'all left out that I'm looking at that might be able to clamp them defensively. Houston's the one team that they feel like they're a group of grown men playing college basketball. And this year's different because last year that guard got hurt. And when he got hurt, that hampered them. And I think, didn't they lose to NC State in that run? It was somewhere in there. Was that like the Sweet 16 or they lost to somebody they weren't supposed to lose to? It might have been Duke. I can't remember who they lost to, but it set up that Duke NC State game, I think. And that guard being out's what killed them. This year they've got guard play where multiple guys can do it. They can beat you in a variety of ways. And they're probably one of the top defensive teams in the league. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think it would be a Final Four matchup, Duke-Houston. I have Duke, Florida in the national championship game, and I have Florida winning the whole thing just because I didn't want to pick Duke. But in my heart, in my head, I'm like, it's going to be Duke. Like, I can't see them messing this up. Like, it's just laid out perfectly for them, and they're going to end up being the flag bearer for the ACC because they're probably going to have to beat like 4 SEC teams just to do this in the end. Well, not 4, they got to play Arizona, but after that, they're going to run into a couple of them just to get to the national championship game. And they'll have to be the ones we kind of go, yay, go Duke, I guess. Like,
no, I'm never going to say go Duke.
Go represent.
All I can hope
is the SEC fans do it. They do it like that. They're like, SEC. Like, so like if Alabama's out, they start rooting for Auburn. I always look at them like, how does that work? Like, you don't.
Well, it's especially painful that not only does the SEC have the all-time record 7 teams in the Sweet 16 this year, the record they broke was the ACC. Because the ACC had 6 one year. But I remind folks that in 2017, when the Tar Heels won it all, there was not a single ACC team in the Sweet 16. So just like the conversation we're having right now, it was only the Tar Heels 8 years ago. And there was some narrative about that. But when your team cuts down the nets, any negative questions about your league are mostly forgotten. And maybe Duke does that for the ACC this year.
And it might help perception with the league, too, if Duke actually wins the whole thing. Because right now, the perception of the ACC in terms of basketball is probably the lowest I can think of in my life. And they're trying to take some steps to do it. And we've hit some of that today. I got to get all these guys out of here. And I know there's people that got to get back to lunch. Tomorrow, we will have Matt Alquiza from Sports Illustrated, beat writer for Carolina Panthers and Charlotte Hornets. He'll be talking to March Madness as well. Still getting the rest of that set up. We'll have some Panther stuff later on in the week as we get closer to the draft. Just a loaded weekend or a loaded week of sports. Shout out to David Glenn. If you're interested in the transfer portal and tracking over probably 1,200 kids in there at this point, it was 1,000 when we started the show, go over to the North Carolina Sports Network. They have a live transfer portal like tracker. Like I assume DG is just sitting at a laptop like all day, just add names.
I need more interns.
Kermit the Frog, just add them all day long. So you can catch up with them, find out who's where, find out if your players are in the portal or whatnot, and all the information he needs is over there. Of course, B-Daht's all over the place. You just follow him on X at B-Daht to find out where he's going to be coming up. And I will see you tomorrow live at 12:30 here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.